Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a completely fascinating paradox happening in the workplace right now. Generative AI it's totally accelerating our productivity and bringing up the baseline quality of our writing. But at the exact same time, it's kind of creating a hidden crisis when it comes to strategic thought and human creativity. Are we inadvertently using these super powerful tools to just sound exactly like everybody else? Let's look at our roadmap. We're going to cover the sea of sameness, quality versus homogenization, ask if you are a self-automator, unpack the statistical average paradox, and finally, look at how to escape the commodity trap. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The sea of sameness, the wisdom of crowds versus AI mediocrity. To really understand where AI is pushing us today, a recent Forbes article points us to a wild historical question. How much does an ox weigh? Back in 1906, at a county fair in England, a statistician named Sir Francis Galton set up this experiment. He wanted to prove that regular everyday people basically lacked the judgment of experts. So he had about 800 regular fairgoers, we're talking farmers, butchers, clerks, guess the weight of this one specific ox. And as you'd expect, the individual guesses were just all over the map. Some were absurdly high, some wildly low. But here's the crazy part. When Galton aggregated all those usable guesses and calculated the median, he got 1,198 pounds. That collective guess was off by only 9 pounds. That is literally less than a 1% error margin. This perfectly demonstrates what we call the wisdom of crowds, where taking independent, diverse thought and mushing it together cancels out individual biases and points us straight to the objective truth. Now, the wisdom of crowds works absolutely brilliantly for finding a single factual answer. But think about creative work, or marketing, or strategy. There is no single correct answer, right? You want to stand out. You want a distinct voice. And here is where it gets interesting. When we use AI, it essentially indexes and aggregates human thought. So in the creative space, aggregating thought actually pushes everyone right into this undifferentiated, totally acceptable, but completely forgettable middle. Section 2. Quality versus homogenization. The academic proof. Let's move from that subjective feeling to some hard academic proof. There was this massive recent study published on Archive that looked at nearly 7,000 AI-augmented student essays, and they pinpointed this core concept called the quality homogenization trade-off. What they found was that, yes, AI universally and substantially improved the baseline quality of the work. It fixed grammar, organized paragraphs beautifully, but at the same exact time, it completely collapsed the diversity of thought. The essays definitely got better, but they all basically became structurally identical. Looking at the data, the contrast is stark. On one side, we have cohesion architecture, which is basically how paragraphs logically connect. The study showed that with AI, essays lost between 70 and 78% of their structural variance. It strictly standardized the logic. But on the flip side, look at perspective plurality. When humans intentionally directed the AI to synthesize multiple different viewpoints, it actually diversified the thought process. So AI doesn't just flatten everything across the board. It really only flattens the dimensions we fail to actively direct. Which brings us to this incredibly powerful quote from the researchers. Homogenization is not an intrinsic property of AI, but a function of interaction design. Let that sink in. The problem isn't the technology itself. The problem is how vaguely we're choosing to talk to it. Section 3. Are you a self-automator? MIT Sloan's behavioral typology. Researchers over at MIT Sloan wanted to see how professionals actually interact with these tools on the job, so they tracked consultants at Boston Consulting Group. They discovered 3 very distinct types of users. First, you have the cyborgs. These folks iterate continuously, bouncing ideas back and forth with the AI. Second are the centaurs, who use AI for very specific tasks that are tightly guided by their own deep expertise. And third, the self-automators. These users essentially just offload the entire cognitive task to the algorithm. I want you to think about that for a second. Which of those 3 categories do you usually fall into during your daily workflow? Get this. The study found that 27% of these highly trained consultants were acting as complete self-automators. They were entirely offloading their strategic thinking to the AI. And researchers strongly suspect that 27% figure is actually a massive underestimate of what's happening in the broader knowledge workforce right now. Section 4. The statistical average paradox. The mechanism of sameness. To really understand how offloading your thought damages a brand, we can look at insights from the branding agency KFADV and Forbes. Generative models operate purely on probability. They naturally gravitate right toward the statistical average, optimizing for the absolute safest, most plausible sequence of words. AI doesn't have a worldview. It isn't trying to flatten your brand's voice on purpose, it's just doing math. If you don't give it strict boundaries, it'll drop you right in the middle of the most crowded, neutral highway of thought. And that leads straight into what we call the commodity trap. Just look at Coca-Cola. Forbes reported they recently tried replacing their iconic holiday campaigns with AI. They pumped out 70,000 video clips in just 30 days. Talk about extreme efficiency, right? But the cost was huge. They completely sacrificed authentic storytelling, and the consumer backlash was brutal. People were widely panning the ads as soulless, creepy AI slop. It's a massive warning. If you optimize purely for production speed without human strategic vision, you risk severely damaging your brand equity. Section 5. Escaping the commodity trap. Intentional prompt design. So how do we fix this? Using a framework from KFAD, the difference all comes down to intentional strategy. A bad prompt is lazy. It's something like, write a post about the launch of our new service. That is exactly how you get generic, statistical average fluff. A strategic brief, on the other hand, acts like identity coordinates for the AI. It translates your strategy into detailed instructions. It defines the specific target audience, your highly distinctive viewpoint, the exact tone, and the core reputational objective. You basically have to map the exact route before you let the AI fly the plane. And to truly break the mold and grab attention, you need that uniquely human edge. Our source from Hello Social Avenue lays out these 6 scroll-stopping B2B hooks. We're talking about making a bold statement, asking a big question, hitting a relatable pain point, offering a counterintuitive take, sharing a short story, or dropping a surprising statistic. To pull these off, you need empathy. You need lived human experience. The AI can absolutely draft the text for you, but you have to be the one to provide that spark of human intrigue. So let's tie all this together into a new operating model. AI is an amazing co-pilot that supports your execution. It is fantastic for structuring arguments, fixing grammar, and speeding up your workflow. But the responsibility for direction, for your unique brand voice, that strictly remains human. An algorithm can simulate a style perfectly, but it simply cannot invent a coherent identity or a real strategic vision. I want to leave you with this one provocative question to chew on today. Are you using AI to replace your strategic thinking, or are you using it to amplify it? The choice between drowning in that sea of sameness or escaping the commodity trap is entirely in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Go out there, be intentional, and I'll catch you next time.